Hello, everyone. This is Cristiana Eltrayan, your host and facilitator for the Pranic Consciousness Summit. We are here tonight or today, depending on where you're watching, with Gerald Pollak, fabulous scientist and professor of bioengineering at the University of Washington, and the discoverer of a very interesting aspect, which is the fourth phase of water. So we'll talk more about it tonight and about how this relates with the possibility of free energy. Thank you very much, Jerry, for joining us, and thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, Christiana. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to our discussion.
We discovered Jerry's work through an interesting series of coincidences by looking at a presentation of the movie. In the beginning there was light. We noticed that your work was there presented with the little references, and that you were also interested in the people that were able to live on prana. So our first question would be, why water? Why did you begin to study this?
Well,
What was your goal?
good question. Sometimes I think about it myself. We were studying muscles, trying to understand how the muscle proteins interact with one another to create force and motion. This is scientists do this sort of thing, and it occurred to me after doing experiments for quite some years that there was a glaring omission from the what goes into the concept of putting together a theory about molecular motion, and that is, our muscles are 70% or so water, depending on your age, and nobody, except one scientist who I know, essentially nobody ever considered 70% of the muscle, that the water plays some role in how muscles contract. And I thought this was really odd. How is it possible? How is it possible that the main component of muscle never gets considered in some understanding of how that machine works? So then came a coincidence, an interesting coincidence. One Hungarian guy came to work in my laboratory, and as we were coming from the airport, Charles said to me, he said, coming up is a conference in Hungary, and you should go there because the conference commemorates a biophysicist, a guy named Ernst. And Ernst was interested in two things. He was interested in muscles and how they contract, and he too was a non-believer in the currently accepted theory of contraction. And he was also interested in water, particularly the idea of so-called structured water, where the water molecules actually organize themselves into some kind of crystal-like lattice. He said, you should go to the meeting. So I went to the meeting as a representative of the muscle community, or I should say as a representative challenger of the current theory of contraction, which still, I believe, is grossly inconsistent with the facts, with the evidence, but that's another story. And there I met a guy who I'd heard of before. His name is Gilbert Ling, and Gilbert is now 98 years old and still kicking. And Gilbert, even by that time, had written, I think, 5 books on water inside the cell. And he brought forth the idea that, or the evidence, I should say, that inside the cell, the water was not like water in this cup, or actually it's coffee, but it's okay. It's got lots of water in it. He said that inside the cell, the evidence shows that the water molecules line up in some ordered way, just like, you might say, a pile of bricks. And this intrigued me. I had known about it before because because I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania, and Gilbert Ling resided in Pennsylvania. And someone once pointed out to me once at a dinner, see that guy over there? He's a crazy guy. He thinks the water inside the cell is ordered, as crystal-like. But I never met him. But finally I had a chance to meet him, and I was so impressed. I was impressed not only by him, but also by all the people who came and who have evidence to support that kind of thinking. It was quite a moment, a memorable moment in my life. So I took one of Gilbert's books and I gave them to my students and postdocs, and they came back to me and they read it and they said, you know, there's something in this that feels. It must be right. It has the sense of making a lot of sense. So I encouraged and buoyed by this kind of feedback from some really bright students, I became more and more interested. And what I realized needed to be done was to bring this message to the world. And unfortunately, the writing of Gilbert Ling is not as clear as his thinking. And so his books are a challenge, and I took it upon myself to respond to that challenge, and I decided I'm going to write a book, and that book appeared in 2001. It's called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life.
Yes.
I like the title.
Yes, it's
Anyway,
nice.
the book was designed to bring forth to the public the ideas of Gilbert Ling, and I think I did that. But as I was writing the book, you know, when you commit something to words, you have to check. You have to check each word and see, is this really true? Do you believe it in such? And it makes you think. And so out of all that thinking came some fresh ideas that went beyond Gilbert Ling. And the book was published, and I think it achieved some of what I wanted to achieve. It gave credence. It gave life to the ideas of structured water, but it also went beyond, and it went beyond in suggesting that that the structure of the water was integral to everything that happens in our cells and in our bodies. And the major theme was when a cell does something, when it acts, for example, when a muscle cell contracts, when a secretory cell secretes, when a nerve cell conducts and such. Step one is the conversion of this ordered water to ordinary water, and then it goes back again. That was the central theme, and so the essence of what I presented was that the water is absolutely central to all the major processes in the body. It's not just a background carrier of the more important molecules of life, you know, sort of like the molecules sitting in a bathtub full of water. It's not like that at all. The water is integral to everything that happens. It's actually part of the proteins. This ordered water sticks to the proteins, and it's a necessary condition for function. So anyway, I transitioned from a scientist in search of the answer to how muscles contract to a scientist interested in the absolutely central and pivotal role of water in life and beyond life, in nature, I'd say. So that's my story. History.
That's really interesting. So it started from biology, actually.
It started from.
I'll wear a headset if it's better. I'm saying that it started from biology. It started from studying actually the way of functioning of the human body, which is the most interesting and close to perfection device in nature. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the more you study it, the more you realize that Mother Nature has a certain brilliance that comes through all the time, and she operates, I think, also in the simplest way possible. Many of the things we understand in nature, or we think we understand, actually seem pretty complicated to me. And maybe I differ from many scientists, but for me, simplicity carries the ring of truth. And when something in the biology books appears complicated, I start scratching my head and wonder whether that these kinds of mechanisms are correct. And so far, this is not so different from what scholars thought for many centuries, like Sir William of Ockham, Occam's razor, where if you have two competing ideas, the simplest one actually is the one that's likely to be correct.
Prevails.
So Occam was thinking in terms of theology, theological principles about the existence of God. And then it was Newton, many millennia, centuries later, who took up the idea and applied it to nature. And Newton said nature works in the so-called shortest way possible, the simplest. Cause and effect. A causes B, which causes C, which causes D. And I think Newton was absolutely right. But much of biology, much of conventional biology is the opposite. And some of my colleagues, I find, revel in standing up before an audience and showing how complex, how complicated their idea or their mechanism is, thinking that the audience will realize how smart they must be to be able to understand so complicated a mechanism. I don't buy. Okay, anyway, a bit of philosophy.
So actually, what you discovered is that there is another phase of water that the one we knew about. So besides the liquid, the gas structure, and the solid structure, there is this fourth phase of it,
yes,
which is the structured water in the cells. Yes,
that's right, exactly.
And this structure shifts back to liquid in the intern processes, and it shifts back again to the fourth phase when it gets into the cells, right?
I wish my students were as clever as you. Yes.
This is what I've understood so far. So
okay.
I was just checking, you know, not being a scientist, I'm trying to translate it in the layman's language so that everybody can, you know, get a grasp on this wonderful discovery of yours. How does it translate, you know, into our lives? I've seen in your videos and presentations that you are now researching of ways to apply this into the day-to-day life, and you have discovered ways in which you could actually, in the physical, not only inside the body but in the physical realm, separate this fourth phase of water that is created in the exclusion zone, to separate it from the particles and the things that get stored in the water. And what can we do with it?
Yeah, okay. So really there are two aspects of your question. One is the practical application, and I'll speak to that in a moment. And the second is really what's going on inside the body and what's involved with this kind of water. So let me first talk about the application, and please remind me to come back to the other, because the fundamental science is so interesting and so important, and actually so simple in terms of what you need to do in your life to be healthy, or at least some aspects of what you need to do. Yeah. So one aspect of this water, as I said earlier, it's like a crystal. It's not exactly the way we believe, the way Gilbert Lynn presented it. He presented it as water molecules stacked, and each water molecule is a dipole. That is, you know, it's got plus at one end, minus at the other end, and therefore it's easy to think about the stacking of these. But we found evidence that this is not correct, and it's something different. But one of the major aspects, whichever idea or concept you like, whether it's stacked dipoles or the hexagonal sheets that we think, when you have a crystal, crystals are pure, and in order to achieve that purity, what they do is they push out any particles or solutes. Think about the freezing of ice, for example. As the ice freezes, it pushes out all the rocks and particles and whatever, and then you have a glacial moraine in front of for example, a glacial ice. Well, this water is the same. It pushes out everything, so you might call it pure. and it pushes out bacteria, pushes out viruses. It basically pushes out all the junk that you want to get rid of, pushes out pharmaceuticals that are plaguing our water supply. And so we pursued in our laboratory and now in the company, new company, pursuing the idea of making this principle, converting this principle of exclusion and getting rid of into something practical. So we found that that all we needed to do was to create this kind of fourth phase, or we call it EZ, or exclusion zone. See, because it excludes. So that's the first thing we noticed, is that this region excludes virtually everything. And so what we do is collect this water, and the water is, you might say, call it purified water, because it doesn't have any of the junk in it anymore.
Exactly.
So we were successful in a laboratory setting. We could achieve really impressive separation, and there's no physical filter in this. Usually, if you want to filter something out, you have a piece of cellulose or something, and the water flows through it, and it collects all the junk, and then you have to get rid of it and put another one and replace it. None of this. There's no physical filter. All you need to do is to create this exclusion zone of fourth phase water, collect the water, and you've got it. The challenge now is to produce this water in quantity.
Yes, it would be nice.
You know, in the laboratory, we can produce enough easy water, as I'd like to say, to satisfy the thirst of a flea. It's a very small amount of water. The production is small. But in the company, we've been able to achieve a much higher throughput, which sets the stage for application of this in many areas. And we're still working on this, and we'd like to make the water available because well, the world is increasingly full of polluted water, which we need to clean. We're also, excuse me, also hopeful that this kind of water it can be used all over, and can clear the many substances that reside in the water. So that's where this project is in terms of practicality. But getting back to nature, and what are we talking about? So it sounds like, well, no big deal. Your cells. People may think your cells are full of ordinary water, like water in a glass, but actually, the cells are full of this kind of ordered, structured, fourth phase, easy water. And we know that that's the case for many reasons. I might just say that this water tends to form wherever you have a hydrophilic surface. So what's hydrophilic? Hydrophilic means water loving. It means if you have a flat surface, and you pour some water, the water spreads out, unlike, for example, a Teflon surface where the water beads up. When the water beads up, we don't find this growth of easy water. But when it's hydrophilic, in most, though not all cases, the water spreads out, and as it spreads out, it forms this fourth phase right adjacent to the hydrophilic surface. So in your cells are full of hydrophilic surfaces. All the proteins and nucleic acids and such are all hydrophilic, and therefore this water must form next to it. And the cell is so crowded with these macromolecules that there's very little space left for the water. And so essentially all the water should be EZ water. And for those of your listeners who know a bit more about biology, the electrical potential of the cell is negative. If you stick an electrode, as we've done many times, into a cell, you get a negative electrical potential. And the current theory is that the electrical potential arises from some behavior of the membrane through pumping of ions and special ion channels. But I think that may not be the case. See, this water that we're talking about is negatively charged. It's not neutral. It's this easy water has typically a net negative charge. And if the cell is filled with if the cell is filled with this kind of water, then inevitably it's got to be negatively charged.
It's negative.
Simpler interpretation of the cell's known negativity, known for 60 years. I'm sorry, you were going to say something? I interrupted.
No, it's
okay.
I was adding that it's negative. Okay.
So the question that arises is, well, what's the big deal? So our cells are filled with this kind of structured water rather than ordinary water. Why should I be interested in that? Well, okay, for a lot of reasons. Essentially, to keep you alive is really what it amounts to. It's of utmost importance. This is the water that represents hydration. When you say you're dehydrated, it means you're missing this kind of water. But let me back up a step and tell you what is needed to build this water, because this is the central point. And I think this is also a point that intersects with the area of spirituality. So we found in the laboratory, in order to create order or structure, you need energy. You got to put in energy. And a simple example of that is your office or your bedroom. It gradually becomes cluttered and messy, right? That's normal. And we say entropy is increasing, disorder increases. But in order to restore it to order, you got to put some energy into that, right? Move from one place to another place, get rid of, throw out, clean. And the principle applies in chemistry and physics. You must put energy in to create order. So what kind of energy is used to create this ordered water? We couldn't figure it out for a long time. And finally, the answer is so simple, we should have thought of it instantly. It's light. And we found, when we talk of light, most of us think about the visible part of the spectrum, the blue through or violet through red, but in fact, it's only a very small segment of light or electromagnetic or radiant energy. It extends way beyond shorter wavelengths and longer wavelengths. So we tried a whole bunch of different wavelengths to see which ones are the ones that are responsible for building this easy. It turns out to be infrared energy. And the wavelength, for those who are interested, is the most effective wavelength is about 3 micrometers. So that's the visible range is from about 400 to 800 nanometers. That's 0.8 micrometers at the long end. And this is beyond that. This is now 1 to 3 micrometers. Other wavelengths work, but 3 micrometers is really powerful. So where does this light come from? It turns out it comes from everywhere. Most of us think about infrared light. If we turn on the electric range or the oven, we can see, or the toaster, it glows bright orange, and we say, oh, well, it's generating heat and infrared energy. But in fact, it's not just those places that generate the energy. It's everything. So if you were to, I see the Christmas lights blinking behind you, but if you were to turn those lights off and turn off the lights in your office where you're sitting, an ordinary camera would see nothing. It's black. However, if I whipped out my infrared camera, whose sensor is sensitive not to visible light, but to infrared light, I'd see a beautiful image of everything, of you smiling, and of the walls, and your necklace, and your headphones, etc. Because everything is generating infrared light. So the infrared, since it's there all the time, it's free. You don't have to pay for it. I mean, it just comes to us, and so the chemists like to talk about free energy, so-called free energy, and that has a special meaning. But here we're talking about the literal meaning that this energy is free, it's available. And because it's available all the time, it means that this kind of water that we're talking about is always there. It's always next to, if you have water and next to any hydrophilic surface, almost any, I shouldn't say every, then the EZ will build. And so you get a sizable amount next to these surfaces, much more than anybody ever thought. Actually, it's macroscopic practically. You don't even need a microscope to see it. That's how big it is. And many people have seen this. This is not and in my book, I give my recent book, this is called The Fourth Phase of Water. It's actually rather popular on Amazon. People seem to like it. Anyway, in the book, I give many examples of this. So the take-home point, the critical point is that in order to build this kind of water, you need infrared energy. Essentially, almost any kind of light, but infrared energy is really effective at building this, much more than other wavelengths of light. So now I come back to your health. So you have to realize that when you're healthy, as you are, I can see, in your cells, every protein, so here's a protein, right? Every protein is surrounded by this kind of water, right? So what do the proteins do for a living? Well, what they do is they fold and then they unfold again. And if you're in a muscle cell, this folding causes contraction. If you're in a secretory cell, this folding, different kind of folding, creates secretion. And if you're a nerve cell, again, every cell, protein folding is what creates the action of the cell. And so, but the protein is not just a protein sitting there. The protein is surrounded by the EZ water. This is the natural state. The water, the EZ water, is part of the protein. They stick to one another tenaciously. And if you don't have enough, then the protein doesn't know what it's doing. It's in a strange environment. It doesn't have this coating of water around it. And so it can't fold. So it misfolds or it doesn't fold or whatever, and you have a pathology. You don't want pathology, so one way to reverse the pathology is to make sure you have enough of this water around each molecule inside the cell, especially the proteins, but also nucleic acids. So the question then to ask yourself is, okay, I need this water, and when I was born I had lots of it, but as I get older, you know, when your hair gets the color of mine, you have less of it. We become dehydrated with age. This is well known, and we need to drink. But in your case, in youth, you know, if you have some acute illness, and if that illness is associated with a loss of EZ water, which is, as I said, dehydration, which is very usual, you got to rebuild it. And so the key, or one key to good health, is to build this kind of water. So how do you build the water? Well, exactly. Yeah, okay, so I'm sorry, I had to give this background in order to lead to the answer to the question.
That's very good.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, so the most obvious one is drink a lot of water, because water is the raw material for building EZ water. And, you know, when you're a kid and you were sick, your grandmother probably said, drink a lot of water. Maybe not, but certainly mine did. And the doctor always says, well, drink a lot, no matter what else we give you, drink a lot of water. And I think that is good advice. A second thing is, I don't know how popular this is in Romania, but in some of your neighboring countries, sauna is very popular.
Yes, yes, for
in
us.
Romania too, is it?
Yes.
Even
I use it a lot.
Yeah, okay. So why? You use it a lot, and you feel good after a sauna. Is that correct? So why do you feel good? Well, you know, the usual thought is some kind of psychological, perhaps, and there's a lot maybe to that. However, the warmth of the sauna creates infrared energy, And that's just the kind of energy that you need in your body to repair your body. Anywhere in your body, everywhere in your body, from your muscles that may be aching beforehand, restoring the easy will help relieve the pains and such, to your head, where your brain is receiving this kind of warmth and energy and building easy water. So those are two ways to do it. A third way, certain substances that have been known for centuries or millennia to be good for health, like turmeric, for example, curcumin,
Yes.
and coconut water, coconut oil. We've tried 6 or 7 of these, and we find that all of them build easy water, facilitate the buildup of easy water. So if you have a certain amount of easy water to start with, and you add these substances in small amounts, you get more easy water. So it may be, yeah. And please.
Can you tell us all the substances that you know of that can be used in this, besides the coconut and turmeric?
The list that we have. So I mentioned a few of them. Another is aspirin. You know, aspirin is a natural compound from the bark of the willow tree, and it does so many positive things. You know, it reduces fever, swelling. It's good for your cardiovascular system. It's anti-cancer. It's been shown recently that women with breast cancer, 50% of the women took 1 aspirin a day, 50% didn't. The ones who took it, their death rate was reduced by something like 50%. Otherwise similar. So many positive aspects of aspirin, and you might say it's a holistic kind of agent because it operates all over the body. And we found that aspirin in small doses grows easy water. We found the same for Tylenol. I don't know if that's available where you are. It's a brand name. It's something like aspirin, but not the same. Same thing.
So it's actually pills that you can buy from the pharmacy, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. But natural, let me think. Probiotics, we tried one group of probiotics, does the same thing, expands the easy water. Let me think. Offhand, sorry, I can't recall. There were 1 or 2, and we also started using CBD, cannabidiol from marijuana. You know, my colleague who is in the U.S. we have so-called medical marijuana. It's approved. There's some legal issues. Approved by physicians who know. He told me that he does that or did that. He told me that among all the agents he knows of, there's nothing more effective than cannabidiol for restoring health. And we have preliminary experiments that show the same thing for cannabidiol builds easy water. So I mean, this is another route, taking substances, you know, we're just beginning these studies. We have many more to study. On the other hand, if you have a substance that is inimical to function, that destroys function, what does that do? And we did a few tests on that too. The one we just completed is glyphosate. I'm not sure if you're familiar. This is the stuff in the U.S. We have a weed killer, which is known as Roundup, and it's very effective as basically a poison to kill weeds, and if you make the crops surrounding these weeds resistant to that chemical, then they grow just fine, and the weeds get killed. So this is essentially a killer, and of course there's a big controversy about what about us?
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. So we studied glyphosate, and we found the opposite. Glyphosate reduces easy water, and you know, a possibility is that many poisons block function by basically dehydrating, removing the easy water.
From the body, exactly.
Yeah, from your body. We don't know how general this is, but we plan to study this in the future.
We could take a look at it and have then solid arguments for not consuming these things.
Yeah, this could be a central agent for how poisons work. Basically, through eliminating the easy water, the proteins can't do what they do.
Yeah.
You die.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, because you stress so much about the importance of this easy water in the body and how it interacts with light. Could this be a connection on how some people are able to transform this energy that is within us and around us, to transform it in nourishment? Would it be a connection between the easy water and this form of nourishment?
Totally. One of the books that was published 7 or 8 years ago by a guy who probably you're more familiar than I am. It's called Life from Light. The author's name I can't remember, but it's a German guy, a PhD in chemistry, who worked, I think, in Switzerland in cancer research or something.
Michael Werner, I guess.
That's right.
Michael Werner.
Yeah.
Yes.
So his book is entitled
Yes. We know about him.
From Light. I think it's absolutely the case. I also know people personally who fast for very long periods of time. And then there's the famous story of the guy from India who claimed that for 65 years, and I know the physician who studied this guy, put him in a hospital room for I don't know, I think 10 days or 2 weeks or something like that.
Yes.
And they gathered a group of physicians, cardiologists, pulmonologists, physiologists, every ologist you can think of. And at the end, they wrote a report, and they measured everything they could. And he sent a video of that to our conference. I organized the annual conference on the physics, chemistry, and biology of water right near you in Bulgaria each year.
Oh, yeah. I would like to participate to that.
Oh, you should absolutely participate. I can give you the contact information. It's usually in October. It's a very exciting meeting. Yeah, and so he presented all the physiological studies that showed that this guy behaved normal in every way except he didn't eat. In this case, he didn't drink either, but this is a very humid part of India. So the answer to your question is absolutely, and the way this works, I think, is that I mentioned that the easy water is negatively charged, but in fact, the region of water next to the easy is oppositely charged. So it's like a battery. Easy is negative, the water next to it is positive.
Positive, yeah.
And if you have a battery, the battery gives you energy. And so it's possible that a major contributor to the energy of your body, my body, is this electrical potential difference, the plus and minus. As you know, batteries can do lots of work. And you have batteries inside your body, plus and minus, that can power many, many reactions. So most of us think that ATP is the coin of the realm, and all energy comes from ATP. There are challenges to that idea that are mostly not known. They appear in Gilbert Ling's words. I think it's possible that the separation of charge we're talking about, which comes from light, is a major contributor to our energy. And I think you're right on with your hypothesis about the light being responsible for giving the energy. Also, spiritually oriented people who meditate, I suppose, I don't know the evidence for this, but I suppose that they have perhaps a larger capacity to absorb energy from the environment.
Yes, and actually I want to bring up an even more challenging hypothesis from my own personal experience, but also my colleagues. Because you mentioned, not only the exposure to physical light can create this effect, but the non-physical light, the light within the matter that we talked about, that is available even on in dark spaces, that can nourish. Because, for example, I spent 10 days in a dark room retreat where there was actually no light available from the physical world,
Really?
and no nourishment. Yes, and we only could consume some juices if we choose to, but we could stay without them if we wanted to check how our body reacts. And actually, my state was pretty well during the 10 days, and I have experienced no hunger, and I actually felt nourished in various ways without having access to any physical light. And at some point, but this is something that could be considered a hallucination in the scientist world. But some of us were able to perceive the surroundings like in an infrared experience, without having an infrared camera, just by our non-physical perceptions. So it's also functioning in environments where we're not exposed to light. And I'm also thinking of those meditators who have spent maybe 3 years in a cave without nourishment and managed to survive, and then came out pretty healthy from a retreat or a meditation. So it seems there is, and that this is a challenge for the scientific world, but ancient texts can be studied, and people from Himalayas can be accessed at some point to check that. It seems there is a non-visible light feeding us more than the visible sunlight that we perceive with the physical eyes, and it can be accessed in different states of consciousness.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of that is, from our point of view, part of that is certainly the infrared light, because we have many experiments that show. But I think what you're alluding to is something beyond infrared light, some light or some energy that we don't really understand, and it certainly could well be. There are a lot of studies now that appear, in fact, at our water conference, the one I mentioned in Sofia. A lot of studies are showing that information, which is a kind of energy, can be stored in water. Experiments from so many different people in many different areas. In fact, we ourselves are starting to study that, and the kind of information that it could be beyond anything that we really have been able to understand. And many conventional scientists scoff at this, because they say, well, it must be wrong because we don't have an explanation for it. But from my own point of view, these are the most interesting observations, because they need to be explained in some way. One colleague just presented, a German guy came to our conference, and he has a very sophisticated way of measuring the physical properties of water. And he presented that when someone 10,000 kilometers away focused their intention on that water, immediately afterward, the structure changed in a dramatic way. And so, these are the kinds of experiments that lead to or bolster your suggestion about a different kind of energy. And from my point of view, these are the most interesting observations to study. While many scientists will just dismiss them because it can't be true, because we don't understand. And we're not a valid approach. No, go ahead.
One of our purposes is to create a bridge between the science that we discovered already and the science that is not yet proved. Because in ancient civilizations that we studied and ancient texts, there are references to these things, and far more advanced concepts like astronomy and the time measurements that we are just now discovering, you know. But they had access to that knowledge in a different way, it seems, a different way than through measurement devices. And it's just now that the nowadays science is catching up to that and is able to, you know, prove it with physical measurements and devices. And it seems like the human not brain, but the human means of perception are far more advanced and at a broader range than the machinery that is built so far. So we're maybe ready now in science to open to that and try to follow up the science of spirituality that has discovered vaster concepts ages ago.
I'm right with you, 100%. And you know, it does seem that more and more scientists are taking up these ideas. There's been a traditional resistance. Scientists have a tendency to be somewhat arrogant. And, you know, we feel secure in thinking that we kind of know what it's all about, and if someone presents an observation that goes beyond what we understand, it must be wrong. And in many cases, it is wrong. In other cases, you know, in cases at least I know, when it's been repeated enough times, and as you say, ancient civilizations have taught us some presented us with observations, and these observations are consistent with what people now are able to see and do. We must take it seriously. That's what science is all about. We opened an institute to promote this. It's called the Institute for Venture Science, and the idea is to provide a place where ideas that challenge the mainstream views can be pursued, and to provide funding for these people. We have a mechanism to ensure that these ideas are not flaky, that these are ideas that just don't fit with the mainstream, but they're really promising ideas that have been suitably vetted. It's a fairly new organization, and we're building it. If anybody's interested, the URL is IVSCI, SCI as in science, IVSCI.org. We'd love to hear from people who have done well and would like to support our cause. We received more than 200 pre-proposals, out of which we've selected a dozen really promising ones that are now being thoroughly reviewed and vetted, especially by people who might oppose those points of view. And so we're moving along, and we certainly could use funding and interest from people. So please don't hesitate. Essentially, we want to promote the kinds of things that we've been talking about during this session.
That's wonderful, and thank you for mentioning that, because some of our colleagues and some of the audience is actually some of them are scientists, you know, that maybe could help with their perception, their discoveries or collaborations, you know, where.
Sure.
We have, and we are collaborating with Nassim Haramein. We have collaborated with neurophysicists and so on that are studying as well areas of science that are, you know, far out of the box, so to speak. Right. And who knows what can emerge from that. I am grateful to be a bridge for.
Right. Yeah, it's really important. Most of these ideas never see the light of day, no matter how promising, because they can't get funding. The reason for that is the people who decide on the funding are the very people under challenge.
Mm.
So, it's like the French Revolution is asking the king, we have a bone to pick with you. Will you please listen to us? We want to overthrow the monarchy. It doesn't.
I understand.
uh,
that, that that's a wonderful joke. So, would you say that at some point, what I'm feeling compelled to ask is this water, if we'd use it for drinking, would it be possible? And if it would be possible, would it have all the minerals and nutrients and all the body needs, and in its purer state, or have we misunderstood the concept?
well, those are good questions. So I can't say for sure. Um, all I can say is, number one, we're working on producing this in large enough quantity that people could drink it. Whether it's good for health, I think it is. I think that since our cells are full of it, and if we don't have enough of it, we need more, and drinking it directly should be a good way to achieve this. Right now, there's so-called alkaline water. There are machines that are so-called Kangen water, the Japanese invention, and that produces water at high pH. And it is somewhat controversial. It's similar to what we're talking about because it has negative charge and high pH. And there's somewhat of a controversy about whether it's good in the long term. I haven't followed the controversy, but I know that in Japan, at first, it was very popular, and then some people objected to this because it hasn't been tested enough. And so clinical trials were carried out. And the clinical trials, according to a Japanese colleague who was involved, were so positive, so extraordinarily positive, that now the government pays if you have any kind of gastrointestinal problem and you go into a clinic, they'll tell you to drink Kangen water and the government will pay for it, thinking, that basically it's cheaper in the long run to drink this water because of the health effects than it is
Exactly.
to not drink it. And someone told me recently they extended this not only to gastrointestinal problems, but also to cancer and gout. So, I haven't seen the evidence firsthand, but this is really interesting. There was another water that somebody produced, and he told me that this reversed irreversible kidney pathology. And
exactly.
I said on the phone to the guy, well, I don't believe you. Actually, I did. So he sent me hospital records, and it was clear. And a colleague of mine went there to visit him and interviewed all of the patients who he claimed had been cured, and they were cured as long as they kept drinking that water. And we tested the water. This was some years ago, and indeed, it contained a sizable fraction of EZ water. So whether the EZ is responsible or something else is, there's something there that seems promising. And how it's going to turn out, I can't say for sure, but we're pursuing this because I think the evidence is enough to suggest that there's something really positive going on there. And that, go ahead.
Well, for cancer, for example, I'm thinking, if, I don't know the medical records, but the Taoist tradition says cancer is an excess of acidity. So the pH goes too much into the acidic range in that area in the whole body, and then it literally clutters in a certain area. Well, if we could in some way add more alkalinity, so more negative ions in that area, then naturally that area would be balanced. So if there would be a way, I don't know if there is already, or if it's on its way to be created, if there would be a way to introduce more negative ions in that area, in those cells who have become in some way imbalance of too much acidity, then the situation would be rebalanced, and the general pH of that organ or area of the body would be restored back to health, isn't it?
It makes total sense to me, what you say. In fact, we've been studying in the laboratory, just actually starting a project to see what happens to cells that are challenged in some way, not necessarily cancer cells, but adding negative charge. Because everything we know, everything we've learned in the past few years suggests that if you add negative charge, boost the alkalinity, it should be good for health. It could be a really powerful kind of tool. So I think you're right on, and it does make sense. I actually am pretty familiar with dehydration. My wife unfortunately has a cancer, and she has both conventional and unconventional treatments, and the dehydration that occurs with chemotherapy is so profound, and I saw firsthand how serious it is. You get dehydrated and you can't function. Everything shuts down. Really, really bad. And chemotherapy seems to do that on many people. So we do what we can. But hydration is so central to everything that we do. Most people don't think too much about it, except, we need to drink water. I know we're getting close to running out of time, but I just must mention the book by the Iranian, perhaps you know of it. It's called "You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty."
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's a wonderful title.
It's a great title. It actually has undergone metamorphosis with several different titles. And the son of the author, who I met by chance, told me that his father's book has sold more than 7 million copies on Amazon. So it's very popular. And basically, this guy is the fellow who wrote it. His name is Bhat Mangalij. We call him Batman for short, because it's too hard to remember the whole name. So Dr. Batman was a supporter of the Shah of Iran. And when the Shah was deposed, many of his supporters were thrown into prison as political prisoners. So this guy was a physician. And so naturally, all the other prisoners got sick. And when they got sick, they went to Batman to, what should I do? And he had nothing available except water. He said, drink a lot of water. And his book describes this experience, not only in prison, but after prison. And each chapter describes a particular syndrome, like diabetes, cardiac issues, even cancer, if I remember. And he describes how, this is anecdotal, it's not a clinical trial, but he describes how effective drinking a lot of water can be on restoring health. So this is really, I think this issue is more important than we usually give credit to.
Exactly.
Just drinking a lot. And I know that Romania has some wonderful water from the mountains and such, and springs. And so, yeah, you have grand opportunity to drink good water. And spring water, by the way, we looked at some, and spring water tends to contain a lot of easy water. So many people think that spring water is good for health, and it might just be that it's good for health, and not only because of the minerals, but also because of the easy water that builds around those minerals.
Because of the iron that it contains as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Could be.
What would be, because we're indeed coming close to an end, because we don't want to keep you too much of your time, what would be the next projects of your institute or research lab? What would be the goals that you are following with this discovery? What do you see coming next?
Well, we would like to pursue the idea of natural healing. we would like to test the idea. I hesitate to use the word prove a hypothesis because you can never prove a hypothesis. All you can do is disprove it. But so far, the evidence is pretty strong that having a sufficient supply of easy water is absolutely essential, bottom line, for health. And we'd like to test this hypothesis by testing more substances that are known to be good for health and seeing if indeed they build easy water as we hypothesize. Because if we can demonstrate that in enough cases, substances good for health build easy water, whereas substances not good for health diminish easy water, then this sets up a new paradigm for understanding us. It's a very simple paradigm, and it can explain the holistic nature of many approaches to health, especially the ancient approaches. The modern approaches are anything but. They tend to diminish the symptoms. If we have a pain in our stomach, they target the stomach and try to cover up the pain. And this is not getting at the root of the problem. So if we can establish that this new principle really does apply, this opens a whole new understanding of what human health and plant health too is all about. And it's cheap. Most of the expedients we're talking about are natural substances, things that you can do. I didn't mention a couple of them, like earthing yourself, grounding yourself, which connects you to a big source of negative charge in the earth, which then seeps into your body and restores the alkalinity that you need.
Yes, exactly.
So there are various approaches that are simple and known to be effective, and we think we have an understanding of why they're effective. And with an understanding of why they're effective, we can improve on all of those. So it's possible that we can find a scientific underpinning of very simple approaches to maintaining and preserving our health. So this is one of the major directions that we follow.
That's one.
Yeah, I mean, I have other interests. I have a new book that I'm working on see, the principle of electric charge, I think, is much more important in nature, in all aspects of nature, than we think. And the book will describe the application of that to many uncertain and unknown features of nature. For example, what keeps the earth spinning every 24 hours? Why do clouds, which are made of water, which is heavy, why do they stay up in the air? What makes for weather? What's the nature of gravitation? How come after all these years, nobody really understands what gravitation is all about? The theories, gravitation involves gravitons. Well, that doesn't help for me to explain to my grandson about why you're glued to your chair.
Exactly.
How does this work? And so the book focuses, and even birds flying. So if I were to ask you, how do birds fly? And your answer probably would be, well, they flap their wings. But I'm sitting in my house now, and I look out, and there's a tree nearby with an eagle's nest. And the eagles rarely flap their wings. They come out of their nest, and they soar every day, and they'll go either with the wind or against the wind or at right angles to the wind, and they'll either gradually go downward or upward or level. And something else must be at play other than flapping the wings. But we don't really think about it. We just assume, well, this is a kind of variant that is an aberration that we really can't explain, but you need to explain it. And
what's your hypothesis on that?
Well, okay, it has to do with charge. Everything that moves through air gets charged. And I can't in 2 minutes give you an explanation that will be convincing, because there's so much. It took me 2 or 3 chapters to do it, but I think the negative charge, and the birds are known to be charged, been measured, and flying insects, the negative charge repels the negative charge of the earth. Many people don't know that the earth is negatively charged, but it's well established. It's just that we don't pay attention to it. And the birds similarly acquire a negative charge, and there's a repulsive force. And this repulsive force is huge. It's not a simple, it's not a trivial force. I give many examples of how large it actually is. So this is just giving you a capsule explanation of what I think. Sorry, this is my telephone, but yeah. So
it's anyway. Fairly understandable, and it would be also an explanation for levitation.
Yeah, I don't know how far we want to go into that, but yeah, I mean, most people think levitation is impossible. And I was just reading a book about a Christian saint. What's his name? I forgot. In Italy, who could demonstrate before thousands of people with written records about his levitation. And in fact, it was an embarrassment to the church, because this guy would be giving a sermon or something, and he'd start uncontrollably rising, and people would be distracted by that. The church was not happy, and so there were several inquisitions against him, and they tried to put him away in some remote place where can't do it, where he wouldn't be seen. So this is just one example, and another example is the people who do transcendental meditation. And I visited the Maharishi University in Iowa. I gave a talk which seemed to be well received, because if they do something that's in between kind of semi-levitation, they do the so-called yogic flying, and you can Google it on the web and find yogic flying and see what they do. They kind of bounce up and down, and I watched it. They did a special demonstration, and the people who do this can rise up to as much as 2/3 of a meter. I heard that even 1 meter was possible. I saw a half a meter approximately in the demonstration. And this is not something you can do just by kicking your knees, something that won't get you very far. And these are hefty people, some of them, who can do it. And after they do it for 20 minutes or so, they don't feel exhausted as you would if you do push-ups. They actually feel like they have new energy, and they feel the 2 words that they use are ecstasy and bliss. It's what they feel when they do that. And that's why people, many of them, faculty members, many of them coming from the Ivy League universities, they go there with practically no salary just to be in that group and to practice this. So it's a pretty impressive place. And when I saw that, I was convinced that this looks like it's actually possible. So I would love to be able to witness levitation myself. I am going to India in, I think, February or March, and I would love to be connected, if anybody knows, with someone who would be willing to demonstrate levitation. I'm going to mention it in my book, but I might not mention it if I've not seen it myself. So I would love to see it. I think levitation, from everything I know, is likely to be real. And I also think I can, if it's real, I think there's a possible explanation that lies within the realm of convention. So we'll see.
Yes.
Perhaps you know someone there who is willing to demonstrate.
Well, actually, if you were to look at our previous interviews, even Nassim Haramein has stated that at some point he has experienced levitation for in various situations, didn't do it consciously, so it's not something one could reproduce. But there are sages and practitioners who are able to do it at will, and if ever I knew anybody, I'll surely let you know.
I would appreciate that.
In the Pranic Consciousness, in the Pranic Festival this year, some scientists came and they measured one of our colleagues, the 83-year-old friend that I told you about.
Yeah.
She is nourished by prana for more than 10 years. So she doesn't have the need of consuming physical food. And they put a device under her bed to measure her weight to measure some body functions during the night, okay?
Yeah.
And while she was sleeping, her body was going up and down the weight scale.
Really?
Exactly, and it can be, I can put you in contact somehow with her and with the guys that did the measurements.
I would love to be in contact.
Exactly, and it's like her weight was decreasing and increasing according to some things that she was not conscious of. So she was sleeping, and while she was sleeping, her body weight was varying in a weird way, in a measurable way. So which explains why actually we are able to levitate in a heightened state of consciousness.
Yeah.
I will share some personal experiences maybe after, which are as bizarre, but you have people to talk about if we get more together. You have people to talk with. I mean.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I need to run.
Okay.
And, so it's been a really great pleasure speaking with you, and I've learned a lot during this discussion.
Me too, and I'm sure our viewers have also great benefits from what you shared, and we'd be happy to hear more on your discoveries and how you follow up with your research, because it's a very vast and important area of research, and we are grateful that you do this for us.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my great pleasure. Thanks for your astute questions.
We hope to see you again in maybe a few years to share more on your discoveries. Absolutely. And the news. And Thank you for being with us, Jerry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for
Goodbye.
you and everything. Good night.